Joining us now, author and NBC News presidential historian Michael Beschloss and former senior aide to both the Biden and Clinton campaigns, Adrienne Elrod. And Adrienne, before we get to Trump's rhetoric and words that he are using that are clear warnings as to what the future would look like if he were elected, tell me how you think President Biden is handling the age issue. For me, it's exactly right in the pocket. Just make fun of it. What else can you do?
Yeah, Mika, I think he's handling this perfectly. And not only is he sort of making fun of it, of course, the gridiron dinner is notorious for speakers coming up and kind of, making fun of their own party, kind of making fun of their own, they're themselves. And Biden, I wasn't there at the dinner, but from all reports, he did an incredible job. But I think he's also marrying that sort of, poking fun at himself with experience. He's leaning into the fact that with age, with experience, given the fact that he started serving in the Senate at age 27 years old, equals getting things done. And then he starts talking about the 4 major economic bills that he's passed, putting the first black woman on the Supreme Court, some of the student loan forgiveness he was able to do. He's gotten a lot of bipartisan things done, Mika, behind the scenes, some of which have been, made major news, like the CHIPS and Science Act passage. And obviously the infrastructure bill was also bipartisan. But a lot of the work he's done in a bipartisan manner has happened behind the scenes. And so I think he's using the age, the fact that he is older, but that he's using that to talk about the experience that he has and the ability to get things done for the American people. And really, at the end of the day, Mika, that's what people want. They want someone in office to serve as president who will get things done for them, and he's done that.
Michael Beschloss, I want to ask you about Donald Trump increasingly sounding like a fascist, a dictator, mimicking them, and using words that are clearly out of the pages of some of the most powerful autocrats or dictators of our time in the world.
Absolutely.
And I guess the fear is that for some Americans who may not be informed about history, there's that vulnerability that Trump preys upon. And then there are those who are making the choice. And I need to understand that. Is there any precedent? Or is this how fascism works? Are they sucked in and brought in on different terms, whether Trump has something on some Republican leaders or others are just so uninformed they don't care? Is it a mixture? How does it work? Is there a precedent?
Well, I totally agree with what you've just said, Mika, and that's how fascism and totalitarianism, and in Germany's case, the Holocaust came to Germany, which had been a country where there were big institutions of democracy until, as you well know, the early 1930s. In a way, Donald Trump has done us all a favor, because if you and I had been talking, Mika, let's say 20 years ago, and we had been talking about what would have seemed like a very abstract and distant subject of how fascism and dictatorship might come to America, you probably would have been more wiser. I would have said you would have had some smiling person pretending to be a normal candidate like all the candidates for president who had gone before all the way back to 1789. And suddenly, after getting elected, that person would use the enormous powers of the presidency that are given to that person by the Constitution. In a way, Donald Trump has made it easier, because when he tells you he'll be a dictator for a day, we all know that dictators don't resign after a day. When he uses the word bloodbath, yes, it was in the context of an automobile industry speech, but he knew exactly what he was saying. When he talks about suspending the Constitution or migrants as animals, this is him. He's telling you what his choice is. So you were asking, Mika, is there any precedent for this? No. I hate it when people treat this race as if it's just one more presidential campaign, with lots of jokes, both sides, flaws in both candidates. Yes, these are 2 old candidates. One of them is mentally stable, Joe Biden, whom I saw give a great speech at the Gridiron dinner on Saturday night. Donald Trump, if you look at one of his speeches at these rallies, this is not someone who seems to have all of his marbles. So all I'm saying is, apologize for the long answer, but it's important.
No.
As we talk about this campaign, as it unfolds, we have never seen anything remotely like this in American history. A major party candidate is saying, you elect me, there's going to be dictatorship, bloodbath, violence, retribution against my political enemies. That equals what we saw in Italy and Germany and other places. If Americans do not get that, if they choose that voluntarily, then this country has changed in a way that I do not understand.